Hi everyone, it's Abby Schillen here with the Agri-Naturalist. Research has been done recently on the metabarcoating of pollen, and scientists are finding out why bees are picking the flowers they do to pollinate. A team of researchers have been working at the Rothenbuehler Honeybee Lab in Columbus, Ohio. Dr. Reed Johnson, Harper McMinn-Sauter, and Tyler Eaton are just a few of those individuals spending their time at the lab to get better insight on bees. Research technologies have been advancing in DNA extracting from pollen using this metabarcoating and then published into a genetic analysis space. This gives insight to farmers in the Midwest how bee pollination selection can contribute to things like soybean and corn production.
So metabarcoating is a method that we use to identify the plants that produce the pollen and the nectar that honeybees and other bees collect. So we first got into this back in 2013 because it's hard to know where the pollen and nectar come from that bees are bringing into the colony. Traditionally, this has been done using light microscopy, and you need to look at those pollen grains at 400x under a microscope to identify the plant that pollen or nectar came from. But that takes great expertise and years, if not decades, of experience to be able to really distinguish between different plants based on their pollen morphology. So at the time, we were interested in finding an easier way to do this. So DNA sequencing is a really useful modern tool that is used in all sorts of fields. And we wanted to apply that to identification of pollen. And so a previous graduate student developed this method and got it to work. We could identify very effectively the different pollens that bees were foraging on in the spring. And then that continued with the work that Harper McMinn-Sauter, a graduate student in the lab, is doing, looking at kind of the season long. What are bees foraging on in agricultural and urban landscapes here in Ohio, spring, summer, and fall, and which plants are best supporting the honeybee populations that we have in the state.
So our lab is primarily focused on honeybee research. There's a body of work in our lab that works on pesticides. However, I work on honeybee nutrition and foraging. So I've been very fortunate in my research to have the opportunity to work with beekeepers around the state, mostly focused in the Toledo, Bowling Green, North Ohio area. And I've been able to closely interact with them. I go and visit them and we collect honey samples together and collect colony weight data. And the best part of that for me is getting to ride around in the bee truck and talk to my beekeepers while they drive me around, and we chat about what's going on with their bees and how their colonies are performing and what they think is going on with the research, which is something that is highly influential of my research is these beekeepers and what they think is going on, because they tend to have these really interesting ideas and they're often thinking of things that we don't necessarily think of when we're working in the lab, and that can lead us to some really interesting conclusions when we pursue the things that beekeepers are finding interesting.
To see more stories from our 2022 Agri-Naturalist staff, check out our website.